All right. So, it has been quite the week. Well, ever since Trump took office, it's been quite a week. Um, he's been doing what's known as flooding the zone, which is basically overwhelming the system so people just can't focus on any one thing. But anyway, let's get to the article, where it describes a bit more about flooding the zone and what its intention is, why flooding the zone is considered a strategy. And then we will look at the past week, which, as you saw, I have not been doing as many videos as I've been wanting to, because it's just so depressing and so much sensory overload that it's just hard for me to pick one thing to be worried about. Anyway, to the article. This has been a wild week with way more news coming out of the new administration than anyone can follow, and that's likely by design. The opposition party is the media. Steve Bannon, who helped run Trump's 2016 campaign, told PBS Frontline 5 years ago. And the media can only, because they're dumb and they're lazy, they can only focus on one thing at a time. So the solution, per Bannon, overwhelm them. All we have to do is flood the zone, he said. Every day we hit them with 3 things. They'll bite on one and we'll get all of our stuff done. Bang, bang, bang. These guys will never be able to recover, but we've got to start with muzzle velocity. The first 3 weeks of the Trump presidency have lived up to that idea, often with far more than 3 things happening each day. They have been dozens of executive orders, an attempted remake of the federal government led by Elon Musk, potentially consequential cabinet appointees confirmed, potentially, some promised tariffs put in place and others delayed, deportations, far-reaching and controversial assertions, and a new version of America put forward on the world stage. I just love an attempted remake of the federal government led by Elon Musk, and not one word about, well, it's unconstitutional what he's doing. That gives you an idea of just how much shit we have to sort through. They can't even add that word. Through this analysis, we'll attempt to wade through the flood, identify and enjoy some of the biggest things that happened each week, and draw attention to some that have been overlooked. All right. So just this week, President Trump says he wants the U.S. to take over Gaza and make it into the Riviera of the Middle East. In essence, ethnically cleanse the Palestinians. Have these other countries take them in because they live in a demolition zone. As if there's literally no reason how that got there. No reason whatsoever. Musk's informal Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, which I really wish people would stop calling it a department, it isn't, pushed forward accessing agencies' records, including sensitive payment information at the Treasury, encouraging federal workers to resign. A court pushed the deadline to Monday for the Deferred Resignation Program, and pushed for the shutdown of USAID, responsible for doling out about half of U.S. foreign aid. And I think I've gone through over some of this before in previous videos, but it is just chilling that Musk will have your bank account number, he'll have your bank account information, and he'll have your social security number. I mean, what does that have to do with the big thing Trump ran on was undocumented workers. Guess who does not have a social security number? That's right, undocumented workers. And then there's USAID. The fact that he wants to cede foreign influence to China is just insane. Not to mention that USAID also gives aid within the US. It's not just foreign aid. Plus they help with pandemics. I mean, it's not just them doling out aid out of the goodness of their heart. It's to make sure that people like us. And it's also to make sure that crap abroad doesn't end up here. Anyway, Trump's cabinet appointees moved forward, including two who were seen as the most controversial: Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for Health and Human Services Secretary and Tulsi Gabbard for Director of National Intelligence. That last one is, I don't know which one is more mind-boggling that either one of them are being considered. Both faced tough questioning from Democrats and Republicans in their confirmation hearings, but they cleared hurdles and were advanced out of committee. Or people just acquiesced to dear leader. Not the Democrats, mind you, because they don't have the power to stop any of this. They can stall, but they can't stop anything. Pam Bondi was confirmed as Attorney General. Among her first moves was to create a weaponization working group to review all cases undertaken against Trump. So, just think about this. They ran on the concept of not attacking their enemies. Well, Trump at first ran on vengeance against his enemies. Pam Bondi, in her confirmation hearing, said, "Oh, there's no enemies list. Nope, nothing to see here." And the first thing she does, enemies list. Are you kidding me? I'm not sure what's more depressing. The fact that this is actually happening, or that there were people who actually believed it. The first migrants in the U.S. without legal status were reported to Guantanamo. They didn't say anything about these people being hardened criminals. They're just without legal status. El Salvador offered to take not just immigrants, but even American criminals, which is so unconstitutional. And you're going to hear me say that a lot. There's a lot that's been happening that's unconstitutional. Trump said he'd like the idea if it could be done legally. Here, I'll give you a spoiler. It can't. It can't be done illegally. I mean, if nothing else, if you go to El Salvador, they have a gulag. You're basically going to be sending American citizens to a foreign power's gulag, where there isn't much resistance to, there isn't much violence in the jails, but that's because they're starved to death. So they don't have the energy to do anything. So yeah, nothing good about this. Trump promised to level significant tariffs against Canada, Mexico, and China. He wound up delaying tariffs against Canada and Mexico for 30 days, but to put 10% tariffs in place against China. And I did a video on this, and it's hilarious that all Canada and Mexico had to do was to promise Trump to do what they're already doing. And he was fine with that. Because that's what happens when you put someone in charge who doesn't have the slightest idea of what is happening, of who's doing what, and what what deals have been made. This guy who claims to be a deal maker, you'd think he would actually, truly look at what deals we've made with our neighbors when it comes to any issue. This is proof that he doesn't pay attention to anything. Because if he did, he would know that the stuff that he came to an agreement with Canada and Mexico was already happening. Or maybe he does know it and he's just, wanting desperately to be seen as the person who got everything done. He just doesn't want anybody but him to get a credit for anything. It could be that, it could be the first thing, could be a combination. Trump signed an executive order banning trans athletes in the NCAA, and there was a memo circulated from West Point banning various clubs, including for women, black cadets, and Hispanics. Which should surprise no one because he's anti-DEI. And I swear the people who are against DEI, especially if you are not white, not male, and not cis or straight, and if you're against DEI, you have absolutely no concept of what you're talking about. Because this is what it refers to. Not just banning trans athletes, which is 10 athletes? I did a video on this. There's 10 athletes. I don't know if it's just trans women or trans athletes in general, but still, 10 athletes. There are thousands of athletes. I decided it was 0.002%. It's so tiny. It is just ridiculous that this is even considered an issue. But then, West Point banning clubs. I've heard women, there have been a lot of talk of sexual assault of women in West Point, among other places in the military. So I guess that most people in West Point won't be bothered by that. But black cadets, Hispanics, I don't know. I'm sure that there are some West Point cadets who will be thrilled that, that the only people who will feel comfortable at West Point are white and male. But I'm sure there's plenty of people who are like, wait a minute, I thought this was supposed to be merit-based. Just because we're white doesn't necessarily mean that we are better than everybody at everything. But anyway, Russia confirmed that Trump and Vladimir Putin had spoken about Ukraine, and Trump said in a separate press conference that he wants Ukraine to turn over rare earth minerals in exchange for continued U.S. funding. Now, I actually read somewhere, I don't know if it was CNN, it was just a notification, I didn't read the article, where it sounds like Zelensky is willing to do that. He's willing to give the minerals, the rare earth minerals, in exchange for U.S. funding. So I don't know if that's happening or not. Trump called for a new air traffic control system. You mean to replace the one you broke? And he revealed that his private jet uses a system from another country, though he did not reveal which. I'm going to guess it's either Russia or China. It wouldn't surprise me if he used either one. Now, he fired the director of the FAA. And immediately we end up with three major airline disasters. Now, it could be a coincidence because, like, at the Reagan National Airport, they've been courting disaster for a while. But the fact that they said that they were fully staffed, but there was one person in charge of both helicopters and planes, which doesn't sound very safe at all. I'm going to say that that's bullshit, that they're just saying that because Trump wants them to say that. Because Trump doesn't want to be seen as breaking stuff. All right. So let's go day by day. Now, this is just Sunday through Friday. So this isn't going to include any badassery that that comes out of his pie hole Saturday and today, which is Sunday. So, yeah. And I'm sure there was plenty coming out of his mouth. Elon Musk, so starting with Sunday, Elon Musk warns that the Treasury Department is making fraudulent payments and said, yes, that the U.S. government should be put on a blockchain, which is crypto for those of you who are uninitiated. That's crypto. So all I can ask is those people who are, claiming Trump, Elon, claiming that there's fraud everywhere. We had a system in place for that. It was called the Inspectors General. The people you fired because reasons. Because you want to commit all the fraud you want. And now you're claiming there's fraud. So yeah, this is Elon's way of being able to get into the system, which has since been revoked. He's not getting access to sensitive information, but still, God knows how much he managed to get to before he was stopped. All right, photos of women and minorities covered up at the National Cryptologic Museum. What? After public outcry, they were uncovered at the museum. An FBI wall of diversity values is painted over. Photos of women and minorities were covered up. Okay, so basically what I'm reading here is that they're trying to erase the fact that women and minorities had any success and anything to do with the Cryptologic Museum, with cryptology. Just because you do not like women and minorities doesn't mean that we didn't do stuff. How thin is your fucking ego that you can't accept that white males are not the only thing that's ever been good ever? Because that you have to erase everybody else in order to prop yourself up. If you feel like the only way to feel good about yourself is to ignore that women and minorities exist and they had accomplishments, that is seriously a you problem. That is not a problem with DEI or whatever you want to call it, because your feelings are hurt because you aren't the center of the universe. But at least they were uncovered later. And I actually saw a picture of the FBI wall of diversity values being painted over. I mean, seriously, words like freedom, diversity, being painted over for what? What are you so afraid of? I mean, I thought that MAGA was all about freedom. And that's one of the words that was painted over. What's going on? Because because Trump doesn't care about freedom. He wants a dictatorship. Anyway, that was just Sunday. Moving on to Monday. Trump signs executive orders creating a sovereign wealth fund, whatever the hell that means, potentially opening the door for the government to try and buy TikTok. Okay. And I might add that the reason, the way Trump is feeling like a dictator is that he's signing all these executive orders. He's not going through Congress for anything. Or almost anything. Trump hits at curbs on Musk's powers. Yeah, right. Telling reporters gathering in the Oval Office, Elon can't do and won't do anything without our approval. And we'll give him the approval where appropriate. Where not appropriate, we won't. I don't know. This was before the Time magazine picture of Elon at the Resolute desk, I think. So doesn't have anything to do with that, but already people are calling Elon President Elon. You know, I remember when Trevor Noah started at The Daily Show, and people were upset. There were plenty of people who were upset because this foreigner was talking about American politics. And now these same people don't have a problem with this foreigner taking the reins of government. I do not understand. Oh, wait. Elon's white and Trevor was black. That might have something to do with it. Anyway, a questionnaire circulates at the FBI to find out the roles of agents in January 6th cases. For those of you who think that it was Biden who weaponized the government, how frightening is this? That Trump is going after FBI agents for doing their job. Trump says he wants rare earth minerals from Ukraine in exchange for continued funding. Trump said he would implement tariffs on Canada and Mexico, but agreed to delay them for a month. He says Mexico will send 10,000 troops to the border. Tariffs on Canada were delayed to see if any economic deal could be figured out. I'm going to say it won't be because Trump wants Canada as the 51st state. So, good luck, Canada. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth visits the southern border. Musk says Trump has agreed to shutter USAID. It became apparent that it's not an apple with a worm in it, Musk said. Oh, this attempt at being clever is just painful. What we have is just a ball of worms. You've got to basically get rid of the whole thing. It's beyond repair. We're shutting it down. Musk and the broader DOGE team were denied access to classified documents by USAID officials because they lacked clearance. Musk responded saying USAID is a criminal organization. Time for it to die. Trump told reporters Sunday of the agency, "It's been run by a bunch of radical lunatics, and we're getting them out." Rubio declares himself acting USAID administrator. I'm pretty sure that was foisted upon him and not that he declared it. A president, however, cannot unilaterally dissolve USAID legally, signaling a potential court fight. Exactly what is it about Trump and his history of anything leads anybody to believe he gives a shit about what's legal? He claims, I'll do this if it can be done legally. I'll do that if it can. Ultimately, he doesn't care. And I can't remember if I actually did a video on this, but first off, his DOGE team is a bunch of incel college students who have no business doing any of this. Well, neither does Musk, for that matter. Like was mentioned, he doesn't have clearance. We have rules in place. Let's see. It's a criminal organization. Why? Because they followed the rules and didn't let you have access? Let's see. It's run by a bunch of radical lunatics. Of course, no evidence is given of that. Now, let's say that he's just trying to get rid of the radical lunatics running USAID. You don't have to shut down an agency in order to restructure it. The same can be said for literally any program. You do not need to shut it down in order to look through the program to make sure it passes muster. That's not how any of this works. The Office of Personnel Management sends a second Fork in the Road email titled Fork in the Road, Today's FAQs. This is the email giving federal workers the chance to resign by Friday in exchange for deferred resignation benefits, what some have termed a buyout. There's so much wrong with this. Number one, the way they did it, it's like just send a reply email with the word resign and, you're part of the program. That doesn't, there are forms to ensure that they get health insurance, that they get their pension. And now this is supposed to assure that they'll be paid through September. Now, first off, if something sounds too good to be true, you're told it is, don't do it. So the fact that they're being offered this through September for not working, and they're being offered money, smells fishy. Plus, Congress hasn't appropriated funds through September because we're about to have another government shutdown in March because Congress hasn't approved a budget that far. I'm not sure where these employees think that they're going to get paid. Not that even if there was a budget through September, I would expect Trump to pay the staff, because Trump has never been known to pay his workers. So I don't know why people think that he's going to keep his promise this time. CBS News sends raw transcripts and footage of its interview with former Vice President Harris to the Federal Communications Commission. Trump sued CBS, alleging CBS made Harris look better after editing. Editing is a thing for everybody. CBS chief Sherry Redstone appears to be considering settling for millions of dollars, despite the news division's strong objections. I agree with that. Former legendary CBS News correspondent Marvin Kalb said on Facebook, "Now more than ever, only a fearless press stands between an aggressive White House and the public. If news organizations such as CBS bend a knee before a president, then we have all taken a big step towards autocracy." Exactly. ABC with them settling with Trump, even though they could have won. CBS considering settling with Trump when they could easily win. The fact that they're willing to settle is chilling, because that tells us that they are going to do what Trump wants. How can you have a free press if they are too scared to do anything but toe the party line and tell people what Trump wants them to say? Okay, let's go on to Tuesday. Oh, this video is going to take forever. Federal judge temporarily blocks moving transgender women to men's prisons and ending their medical care, which is great news that he blocked that, because it's not the cis women who are in danger by trans women. It's the trans women who have to fear cis men who are in danger. So basically, the judge stopped trans women from getting raped. So there is that. And ending their medical care? Why? Why are you ending their medical care? You're not ending it for cis people. Of course, I probably shouldn't be giving Trump any ideas. You're not ending it for cis people. Why are we ending it for trans people? It makes zero sense. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt announces on Fox News that the first flights of immigrants in the U.S. without legal status arrive at the Guantanamo Bay detention facility. Because, we want to be respected around the world. Ugh. El Salvador offers to put immigrant criminals and even Americans in prison for a fee. Trump says he likes the idea if it's legal, which, as we said, is not. It isn't legal. But, El Salvador is just doing this to get money. That's all they're doing. And people are going to suffer because of it. Trump accuses USAID of being corrupt and getting kickbacks. They're not. USAID website goes back up with a message stating that all staff overseas were being recalled with some minimal exceptions. A Congressional Research Service report is published and notes that the president does not have the authority to abolish it, the USAID. Congressional authorization would be required to abolish, move, or consolidate USAID. So basically, the only thing standing between us and Trump completely running amok are not just the courts, but if Congress actually develops a spine. And I mean congressional Republicans, because Democrats are in the minority in both houses. So they can't do much. Anyway. Not to mention the absolute travesty that this order is having. People are totally confused as to what's happening. So there was a line for kids to get their TB medicine for tuberculosis. And they were able to give medicine to 3 kids, and the rest were sent home. There are people who are starving to death, who can't get food because USAID had to shut down. I mean, it is just horrendous. Not to mention any pandemics that are happening around the world could make it to our shores because it's not being contained. Musk, per the New York Times, has told administration officials that he thinks they could balance the budget if they eliminate the fraudulent payments leaving the system. Without explaining which ones are fraudulent, because, But it's not clear what his basis for that is, because the federal deficit for 2024 was $1.8 trillion. The Government Accountability Office estimates in a report that the government made $236 billion in improper payments, 3/4 of which were overpayments, across 71 federal programs during the 2023 fiscal year. And I've also discovered that a lot of these payments that a lot of these government spending bills that he's been discovering he's been finding on usaspending.gov. This is public information. So if all he's doing is just that, why is he acting like the freaking Gestapo? There are reports about what young Doge workers are doing at agencies. including installing a server at OPM and having the ability to rewrite code at the Treasury Department. Senators Elizabeth Warren, a Democrat from Massachusetts, and Ron Wyden, a Democrat from Oregon, calls for the Government Accountability Office to investigate. Now just think about this. They are rewriting code on a payment server. So basically, anyone who is getting, say, Social Security payments, Medicare, Medicaid, who knows what else. I mean, they might actually be, just writing out of existence old Social Security numbers for all we know. I mean, Vivek Ramaswamy was saying about how, we could get rid of these numbers, not knowing that numbers are assigned by state. So, I honestly don't know what they're doing, and it's really scary. Workers at the quasi-independent Consumer Financial Protection Bureau are told to halt work by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Trump tapped Bessent to also act as CFPB director. Yeah, there's no conflict of interest there. Oh, Lord. Trump nominee to lead National Counterterrorism Center, Joe Kent, draws controversy because of ties to far-right extremist groups. Darren Beattie is also put in an acting role despite also having ties to white nationalists, and a tweet he wrote 4 months ago stating, "Competent white men must be in charge if you want things to work." He was fired as a speechwriter in the first Trump term for attending a conference with white nationalists. But since Trump is now openly embracing white nationalism because he no longer is beholden to voters, it's no longer a problem. In case you thought that, Trump said he's not going to implement Project 2025, he isn't a white nationalist. Yeah, he's a white nationalist. FBI agents sue over probe into those who worked on January 6th cases, which is good. Senator Bill Cassidy votes for Robert F. Kennedy Jr., despite concerns he raised over Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s stances on vaccines. With Cassidy's vote, RFK Jr. clears a key Senate committee on a party line vote, 14-13. Former Representative Tulsi Gabbard also clears a key committee for Director of National Intelligence, despite concerns raised by senators in both parties. Basically, all I'm reading, especially with that first one, is that Trump got to them. Trump got to these people and made sure that they towed the party line. Because what is going on here? Especially from a physician whose whole reason for being concerned is that he's anti-vax. Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu meet and hold a bilateral news conference. Trump calls for Gaza to come under U.S. control and for Palestinians to be permanently resettled out of Gaza. Because that's not controversial at all. I see it as a long-term ownership position. He says it potentially could be the Riviera of the Middle East. He says he might use troops if necessary. Later in the week, he walks back saying he would use troops. Because everybody was like, what the hell is this guy on? Stakeholders in the region and U.S. allies publicly shoot down the ideas. That includes Saudi Arabia, which Trump said is going to be very helpful. The Saudi Foreign Ministry affirmed that its support for a Palestinian state was firm and unwavering. one of the few times I'm saying go Saudi Arabia, because I am not a fan of Saudi Arabia, but in this case, if that's the only thing preventing Trump from doing something completely wackadoodle, I'm fine with it. 10% tariffs on China go into effect, and China issues retaliatory tariffs, which, there's a shock. Trump signs executive order pulling out of UN Human Rights Council. Right, because nothing says you care about human rights than pulling out of the Human Rights Council. Yeah, sounds about right. Oh, and one more thing about the tariffs. Before Trump struck the deal with Canada and Mexico, they did also issued retaliatory tariffs. So that was probably part of the reason, because people probably told Trump that this is bad. Now, how often they're going to be able to tell him that and he's going to listen, I have no idea, because there's only a 30-day pause. So what's going to happen in 30 days? It sounds like tariffs are going to happen no matter what Canada and Mexico do. So, all right. Now we're only up to Wednesday. Democrats engage in an all-night talkathon in the Senate to protest Russell Vought's nomination to be director of the Office of Management and Budget. Democrats could not stop the nomination because of a change implemented a decade ago that eliminated filibusters for presidential nominees, which I think was actually the Democrats doing. I think they're the ones who got rid of the filibuster. This is one of those times where, on the one hand, filibusters seriously suck, and the Republicans were using it as a weapon, but could have been useful now. So, yeah. Employees working with former USDS, now Doge, told to stop using Slack until they can transition to a platform that is not subject to the Freedom of Information Act. Because that isn't suspect at all. Working for basically working for a company, or in this case an agency, which isn't beholden to open press laws. Yeah, that's just basically screaming we want to do shady shit. Ahead of the deferred resignation deadline, federal workers used spoon emojis in response to Musk's fork in the road email subject line. It's the same subject line Musk used when he downsized Twitter, now X. IRS workers told they have to stay on the job through at least May 15th, even if they already resigned, if they're deemed critical during tax season. So they want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to claim that they are cutting government, but at the same time realizing, oops, we might need these people. So maybe we are being a bit hasty. Leavitt partially walks back Trump's comments about Gaza, saying the U.S. would not be paying for a rebuild of Gaza, that he'd instead work with stakeholders in the region, and there would be no U.S. military boots on the ground. It's been made very clear to the president that the United States needs to be involved in this rebuilding effort to ensure stability in the region for all people. But that does not mean boots on the ground in Gaza. It does not mean American taxpayers will be funding this effort. It means Donald Trump, who is the best deal maker on the planet, is going to strike a deal with our partners in the region. Trump signs executive order banning transgender athletes from girls' and women's sports, but not men's sports. I wonder why. I wonder if he's even aware that trans men exist. The NCAA says it will adjust to the order. NCAA President Charlie Baker, a former Republican governor from Massachusetts, was asked about how many trans athletes there were in the NCAA. He said 10 or less out of 510,000, which is, like I said, insane that we're concentrating on that. Anyway, I have a whole video on that. A federal judge in Maryland indefinitely blocks Trump's birthright citizenship executive order. A federal judge out of Seattle previously blocked it for 2 weeks, which is great news because, like I mentioned to at least one commenter who said that not only legal status, but you have to be a citizen, you're basically saying that I did not deserve birthright citizenship because my parents only had a green card when I was born. Russia confirms talks with Trump White House on a negotiated end to the war in Ukraine. That doesn't mean anything was dealt with. U.S. Postal Service reverses course, lifting a ban it put in place a day earlier on packages coming from Hong Kong and China. The ban could have meant disruptions for shoppers on apps like Shein and Temu on inexpensive clothing coming from China. And that was because he signed some sort of executive order, but I couldn't quite follow the ins and outs of it. Something about retailers making less than $800 don't have to pay duties or something. Let's try that again. Trump nominates Neil Jacobs, who was cited for misconduct because of his role in Sharpiegate, to lead NOAA. He previously led it in an acting role during the last Trump administration. For those who don't know what Sharpiegate is what you would think. I don't know if you remember this, but when there was a hurricane headed towards, I think it was Florida? I can't remember exactly where. It could have been headed towards Louisiana. I can't remember where it was headed. But Trump tried to change the trajectory with a Sharpie, as if the hurricane would follow his Sharpie rather than just go where the warm water is. I mean, that is literally not how hurricanes work. You cannot change the course of a hurricane with a Sharpie. If you could, I'm sure there would be plenty of people who would have been doing that by now. A memo circulates at West Point disbanding various clubs and events related to diversity in some form. Whether it's Women's Engineers, the Latin Club. Why the Latin Club? A Korean American Relations Forum, or the National Society of Black Engineers. I'm still dumbfounded with the Latin Club. Why the Latin Club? The others I understand because we're dealing with a bunch of bigots. That I understand. Why Latin? Anyway. Pam Bondi sworn in as Attorney General. Trump says Bondi will be as impartial as you can be. Which lasted, 2 seconds? Within hours, she issues a directive to review all of the cases against Trump. It is being called the Weaponization Working Group. Bondi also disbands a Biden-era foreign influence task force, which was aimed at seizing assets of Russian oligarchs as part of an effort to punish Russia for invading Ukraine. Not only does it do that, but it also prevents foreign influence in our elections. You know, the very thing that we've been screaming about, Russia, China, Iran, trying to influence our elections. This is just going to make it a million times worse because now we're not going to even know because there's no task force to tell us. So thank you for that. The acting deputy attorney generally accuses FBI leadership of insubordination for refusing to identify a core team that worked on January 6th cases. Oh well, I guess they're insubordinate. Buyouts offered to CIA, Office of the Director of Intelligence, and National Security Administration. The CIA sent an unclassified list of staffers hired within the past 2 years and who are still on probation, making it easier to fire them. So much wrong with that sentence. Intelligence professionals told the New York Times that the sending of the list outside of a classified system makes them concerned that it makes them more vulnerable to being identified by Chinese and Russian hackers. So yeah, we're just putting targets on these people's backs. I mean, I just do not see how this is going to end well for any of these people. And the fact that the CIA is willingly doing this is really concerning. A military plane of about 100 Indian migrants in the country without legal status landed in India. And they were shackled, and the Indian government was less than thrilled with that. Okay, so Thursday. So yeah, Narendra Modi, did have a conversation with Trump about how he treats migrants. And I'm sorry, this should surprise absolutely no one because he's trying to be tough on illegal immigration and he wants to make every migrant out there out to be a hardened criminal. And obviously hardened criminals need to be in shackles, whether these people are hardened criminals or not. Because if you believe that the only people who are being kicked out of the country are hardened criminals, then you must live your life in a corner of your basement with a gun, too afraid to go outside. Because that's how many people we're talking about. There isn't that much criminal activity going on amongst migrants or any undocumented. There is crime, absolutely, but not as much as your typical U.S. citizen would do. Well, I shouldn't say typical, but the U.S. citizens commit more crimes than migrants and other undocumented. So I'm not sure where we're getting this idea that all these people are hardened criminals. Anyway, let's move on to Thursday. The Justice Department sues Chicago and Illinois over immigration sanctuary laws that limit cooperation with the federal government to deport people in the U.S. without legal status. Now, I've heard claims that some of these sanctuary cities are harboring dangerous criminals, and if true, that's messed up. But otherwise, yeah, they're just here illegally. But if they haven't committed a crime beyond that, it's a civil violation. I'm not sure why people are getting all bent out of shape about it. Federal judge in Massachusetts pauses deferred resignation deadline to Monday. A new hearing is set for Monday as well. Boat expected to be confirmed as OMB director along party lines. Judge limits Doge access at Treasury pending labor union lawsuit over access to private information. Musk and team will be limited to read-only access. Now, that's great that they're limited to read-only, but they're still going to have access to private information. Unless the private information isn't under read-only. Maybe they aren't allowed to access that anymore. But the fact is they did for a little while. God knows how much damage that did. Trump doubles down on the idea of taking over Gaza in social media post. The Gaza Strip would be turned over to the United States by Israel at the conclusion of fighting, he wrote. He contended, though, that the U.S. troops wouldn't be necessary. The U.S., working with great development teams from all over the world, would slowly and carefully begin the construction of what would become one of the greatest and most spectacular developments of its kind on Earth. No soldiers by the U.S. would be needed. Okay, so is this going to be the Riviera of the Middle East? Or is this going to be something that nobody's ever seen before? Because I'm pretty sure the Riviera exists. So, which is it? But the fact that he's still insistent on owning the Gaza Strip. He wants Canada, he wants Greenland, he wants the Panama Canal, and now he wants the Gaza Strip. What the hell? I mean, he already got Google to change the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, which, by the way, I will never call it that. I mean, hell, there are stores that do not exist anymore in this town that I still call by the old name, simply because they've been there for that long. So I'm certainly not going to start calling the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America just because someone wasn't hugged enough as a child. CNN reports that Musk's Doge team wanted to shut off USAID spending from the Treasury. Emails show sharp exchanges between a career Treasury official and a Musk associate. I hope that Treasury official made that Musk associate go crying home to mommy. Because what the hell? Which, by the way, I can't remember exactly what's going on, but apparently Musk has run afoul of USAID, and that's probably why he wants it. That's why he wants all of these organizations terminated. It's personal. Trump meets with House Republicans to discuss budget priorities. 10 migrants, members of a Venezuelan gang, are now being housed at Guantanamo, in a part of the prison that previously held members of Al-Qaeda. Okay. That's a bit harsh for gang members, and I'm not considering this as Trump and his White House saying this. I assume it's them saying this. I don't know whether I even want to believe that they are part of a Venezuelan gang. I mean, he claimed that about Aurora, and even the mayor of Aurora was like, no, we aren't being overrun by a gang. Everything's fine. So, yeah. Wouldn't be surprised if none of them were actually part of a gang, let alone a Venezuelan one. Trump says at the National Prayer Breakfast that he wants to root out anti-Christian bias and has asked Bondi to set up a task force looking into it. Translation, if somebody who's Christian says something or does something and somebody says that's against the law, or I'm going to sue you, or just simply disagrees with them, that's anti-Christian bias. All right. At the same event, he calls for a new computerized air traffic control system. He also says his private jet uses a system from another country because U.S. air traffic control is so bad. Which, I didn't say this earlier, but how does that even work? The point of air traffic control is that they can see what's happening with their own eyes. If you're if you're getting your air traffic control from another country, how the hell do they know what's happening? All right. When I land in my plane privately, I use a system from another country, he said, because I won't tell you what country, because the captain says the system is so bad, it's so obsolete, that we can't have that. Forbes reports that Trump appears to be conflating his plane's navigation systems with air traffic control. Now that makes a lot more sense. A lot more sense and is absolutely hilarious. Because that didn't make a lick of sense. How can air traffic control know what's happening in another country? The whole point is that they're in a tower and they can see planes landing. They can see when bad things are about to happen. That's why when you move from one airspace to the next, you deal with different air traffic controllers, because they have their systems are up. They might have eyes on the plane depending on where you are. I mean, duh. So that makes sense that he's conflating navigation with air traffic control. That sounds like a very Trump thing to do, to not know what anything is. Okay, so the only thing that happened Friday was the jobs report was released. Okay, so that is all I have for this article. And there's really nothing much else to say about this. But so with that, I will see you guys in the next video.